This is Joey, but you can call me Pastor Joey because I'm a pastor.
And this is Jared, his big brother, and I guess you could call me teacher because I'm a teacher.
You're a teacher, man.
I'm a teacher, yes.
You're a bald-headed teacher, and I'm a bald-headed pastor, and this is the Pastor with No Answers. And, Jared, I think we would actually irritate a lot of people. It hit me that when you were in town, one of the biggest movies of all time was out, and that was the newest Star Wars movie, and you and I actually chose with our wives to see the movie Creed over the new Star Wars movie. Does that make us bigger Rocky fans than we are Star Wars?
Well, I totally am.
Yeah, I would say I am too.
But secondly, too, my daughters have no interest in seeing Creed, but they have lots of interest in seeing Star Wars.
Okay. Yeah.
And I still haven't seen it yet because my daughters were sick the entire back half of Christmas break, but we're going to probably see it this weekend or maybe next weekend. So we're
I heard a lot of good things about it.
Me too.
Have you seen Hateful Eight yet?
I'm going to see that probably by myself this weekend.
Dude, I'm probably going to see it by myself too because Priscilla's out of town and Mom and Dad offered to watch the kids for Friday and Saturday night. And I was like, well, I actually do like my kids, so I'm going to spend time with them on Saturday. And then Friday, I'll probably go see that movie.
Yeah.
Hey, what's your favorite Tarantino movie? And I also, I think I know the answer to that. It's Pulp Fiction, right?
Yeah, but I think that his best movie is Inglourious Bastards.
Okay, well, here's what I wanted to ask because I am really I have seen Pulp Fiction a handful of times, Django a handful of times, and Inglourious Bastard I think twice. I kind of liked what's the one named after the girl? What's her name?
Oh, Kill Bill?
No, the other
Jackie
one.
Brown.
Yeah, Jackie Brown.
That's my third favorite.
Yeah, that was okay, and Kill Bills are okay, but I really like Django Unchained and Pulp Fiction the best. Is there is there a different style of movies that he has within his style of movies?
Oh,
and then my second question is, was Kill Bill that style? Like, wasn't Kill Bill totally different than his other movies?
Yeah, I mean, I think that his deal is he likes to pay homage to different genres, like grindhouse genres. So, a movie like Kill Bill, he incorporated a lot of the Hong Kong action flicks. He has Japanese anime in Kill Bill Volume 1. And then in Kill Bill Volume 2, it's a lot of the scenes take place in the West, so it's got the spaghetti Western feel to it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely. I think every movie he does, he's kind of borrowing from certain genres of the grindhouse, category of movies.
Now, do you think he'll ever break away from a Tarantino-type film and try to do something just completely different, or he's got his niche and he's going to stick with it?
Well, I would argue that his movies are different. Like, he has an unmistakable style. Yeah. Like his dialogue is genius in my opinion. But I think he is doing a good job of not making the same film over and over again. I mean, Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, there wasn't that much of a difference. I mean, Pulp Fiction was, I think, a clearly better movie, but he kind of stuck within the same genre. But then once you get past, Jackie Brown, Kill Bill is radically different from Inglourious Basterds, and that's radically different from Django Unchained. So, I mean, I think he is doing as much as he can to be different, but still retaining the Quentin Tarantino style. So
right, gotcha, cool, awesome. Yeah, Django's definitely my favorite, man, and that's probably your least favorite.
No. I think my least favorite. Well, my least favorite is definitely Death Proof.
Never seen it, never heard of it.
Yeah, it's he did a split double feature with Rodriguez. So Rodriguez did a movie called Planet Terror, which is a zombie movie, which is really good. Yeah. And then the second half of that was Tarantino's Death Proof, which is okay. It's got Kurt Russell in it, and I like him a lot. It's good. It's just kind of slow moving. The ending is really good, but that's definitely his weakest, I think. Django, I would probably put number 4 or 5.
Gotcha.
So.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I did too. I liked it. Yeah.
All right, well, we're going to take a second for our music sponsor coming from Bad Apple Records again. This is kind of an exciting project that they're giving away. It is allaroundthedinnertable.com. The band's not .com. That would be a really weird name for a band. But go to allaroundthedinnertable.com. Check out this project called All Around the Dinner Table. We're going to let you hear a clip right now of a song called Wolf and Sheep. And stick around to the very end of this podcast, and we've got the song in its entirety.
Curse these hands, they only toil in vain. They've caused a lot of pain around the ones I love the most. Lord, curse these hands until they only work for you. In everything I do, your kingdom come. Lord, curse these lips until they only speak of peace. Lord, all of you and none of me.
All right, so that was Wolf and Sheep. Jared, pretty cool stuff. And,
definitely.
Yeah, Brandon Miles, he kind of comes from the same heritage as Jared and I, and listens to folks like Smashing Pumpkins, REM, Mineral, Dave Bazan, Weaker Thans, and that sort of thing, and that's where he gets a lot of his influence from. So go to All Around the Dinner Table for a free 4-song sampler and pick that bad boy up. And like I said, if you hang around to the very end of this podcast, we've got the song that you just heard, but in its entirety. So now we're joining with our friends from last week, going to continue the conversation, go a different direction with it, but we're happy to have Godless and Mark Salomon. All right, so we are with Mark and Godless again, continuing the conversation, but we are going to take a sharp turn away from science. I'm going to read something that Godless emailed me, and I thought it brought up a pretty good, valid point. He's been listening to the Bad Christian podcast. We talk a lot. I open up about my depression very often. Godless is a big fan, as Mark is too, and that means a lot to us. It's really cool.
I love you.
So he emailed me. He said, I feel awful for what you guys are going through. I wish when bad things happen to you, you could face it as being shit rather than questioning your place in the eyes of your deity. Fearful you haven't crossed yourselves properly, or maybe walked under a ladder to cause 7 years of bad luck. Now, I will say, Godless, that I don't see how you get that out of our conversations. When I struggle with depression, I don't think along the lines of, man, I must have been screwing up or making God upset. How have you gotten that?
Well, that's good to hear, because I'm very glad to hear that. But I guess what I was sort of referring to is the idea that when you talk about what all three of you guys have struggled with recently in different ways, you'll say, we prayed about it and it hasn't been enough. Now we need to get medical help to solve this thing, or we just need to get through it emotionally by, trusting each other,
what
or
kind of
whatever it
Christians are you
is.
hanging around with, man? Jeez. Did they club their wives in order to pick them up? I don't get it. Oh, man.
But I guess the idea is that, all right, if we're going to talk specifically about your depression, Joey.
Yeah.
So when you've talked about the depression on, there was one particular episode where you talked about how, man, I struggled for years thinking that as long as I prayed, long as I was good, God would answer my prayers and would cure me of this, but it didn't happen.
Right.
I needed to get medical attention to make this happen.
Right.
So that's kind of what I'm referring to there. Like, why would your deity have abandoned you? And I mean, personally, I would react to that with, well, geez, I need to fix something about me, something else about me, in order to get this attention from this thing, this deity that supposedly loves me, but for some reason doesn't love me enough right now to fix me how I need to be fixed.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you the lenses that I see all pain and suffering through, and just one facet of it is if I'm God and I see humanity and I'm like, man, I really love humanity, and then I also know their faith is the most important thing that they can have. And if it takes trials and going through things and them drawing closer to me, if it takes that sort of thing for them to have more faith, then that stuff has got to have its place as the joyful things and things that make them happy. All of that stuff together forms their faith, strengthening and them drawing closer to me. And the reason why that's important is because God sees eternity. We don't see eternity. Now, I know, again, that sounds silly, but my frame of reference is that when God sees Joey suffer, he can also be like, man, that sucks. It breaks my heart, but forever and ever and ever, that young man's going to be with me, and it's going to be perfect, and it's going to be okay. So I think you see pain and suffering and agony way more from a short-sighted, and I'll grant you maybe even accurate perspective, but I believe wholeheartedly that this is just a snap of the fingers in comparison to eternity, and this life is just but a vapor.
Pain and suffering, I think, you're really bringing up sort of the problem of evil, and it is a problem in any religious in any religion. You can have suffering, you can have pain that exists without evil. Problem is that the world does have things that are even more awful versions of themselves. For instance, if a child were to die in their sleep in the middle of the night, it's an awful tragedy. Parents go through it. From the Christian perspective, it's like, well, for everybody who survives, it's going to suck, but you're going to come out better out of this at the end of the day. It really sucked for the person who died, but we're not going to, think about that too much.
Yeah.
But the problem is that, well, all right, if the child dies in their sleep, yeah, okay, that's an awful tragedy. But, well, how about like dying of a disease that causes debilitating pain for months, or a child who drowns to death, or some of the most like horrific deaths you could possibly imagine? Why would God or a loving God specifically choose those kinds of ways for somebody to die or to suffer rather than just letting them go and letting the people left behind suffer?
Do you have any kids? You have kids, right?
Absolutely.
Well, why would you let them, as a 2-month-old, or let's go 2 years old, why would you let them lay on a doctor's office table while you help the doctor hold them down while they get 3 shots in a row? It's super, super painful. And from your kid's perspective, they see it as, Dad, you're supposed to be on my team. Why are you letting this guy inflict such pain and agony? Well, you can easily not explain this, but you very well have it in your mind of, man, my son just can't understand, but this is good. Like, in the long run, this is good.
Are you possibly trying to equivocate a child drowning unnecessarily with a child getting a shot so that they could not get a disease?
Well, what if that son was growing up in a household where he was going to be beaten and sexually molested, and God took him home early? I have no idea. But
why wouldn't God choose for the child to just die in their sleep? Or even better yet, why wouldn't a loving God swoop in and do something? I always find this amazing, this idea that this God is this all-powerful and all-knowing and so fantastic and so loving, and yet so helpless. It doesn't seem to be able to do anything that's good. It's always like, well, this is the best he could come up with.
But here's the problem: you also get a little. You would get upset for God sending a flood to wipe out everything, and you can't have it both ways. So there's a lot of evil. There's a lot of messed up stuff going on. God's like, okay, well, I have to destroy evil. And you're like, well, you can't destroy evil. You can't do that. That's so messed up. And it's just like, well, what do you want God to do? So you want God to step in and stop everything, but to stop everything, wouldn't he have to stop evildoers? Or do you want, what do you want God to do?
Well, I think that what I want God to be is as advertised. If God wants my
As advertised by whom?
God damn it! By the freaking Bible or by the freaking any of the religious books. Which if you're gonna say that this is a character that loves me, loves my kids, loves everybody, then act like it. If you want my faith, then do something that would encourage it to happen. If you want my praise and devotion, then do something that deserves praise and devotion. But none of this stuff is the best way to do anything by any moral standard.
All right, Mark.
Well, my response to that, as far as this God being as advertised, and why would he do this way, and why wouldn't he do it that way? I mean, I think that's a very convenient question to ask. And it's all coming off of what your definition of what a good God would be. And since there's going to be a million different definitions, where do we go from there? And while some people may not like this response, and trust me, within Christendom, I guarantee you there are plenty of people who don't like it. I don't think God works that way at all. He hasn't given any evidence of that in the Bible. That's the other thing. As advertised, I heard that. The God in the Bible is not someone to hug. This is not the God that we are proclaiming and claiming to believe in. Read Job. That's not the God. That makes no sense. That book makes no sense. If that's the way you want to approach, why doesn't God do this or that? That book makes no sense at all. And it's because it's coming from our perspective. I submit that if he is whom he says he is in the Bible, he doesn't really need to explain anything, and he doesn't need any of us, not just you, but me or anyone else here, to buy what he's selling. We either obey that will or we don't. And there is a certain logic there. If you're the creator of the universe, if you're the definer of right and wrong, what you say goes. Whether or not we like it is not really the question. If you are that who he is claiming to be, our definition of right and wrong is really irrelevant. And that's a good thing, actually.
That's a horrible thing.
I think it's a good thing because
that's what
if
that's
we were
what
subject
planes into the World Trade Center.
If you were
it's the same different thing that
you bring up a very good point. You bring up a very good point. Those guys who did what they did to the World Trade Center were acting on their own beliefs, what they believed was the right thing to do. There's a group of people committed to what they believe. So if right and wrong is going to be defined by people like that, we are all fucked, man.
But if right or wrong is being defined by people like that have got nothing on the things that the Old Testament God was doing on an almost daily basis.
Exactly. I'm not saying that they do. I'm saying their definition of right and wrong means nothing.
I reject all of it. And this is where it comes into, we go from atheism to almost coming to anti-theism, which is something that I don't necessarily want to go to because my agnosticism stops me from doing so. But anti-theism would be the idea that even if this God did show himself, I'd still tell him to screw himself. And I think that if you read the Old Testament and with what you have just said, that's a pretty, I think, morally correct thing to do.
Well, that's what you think. So as long as you're the one who's making the definition, we will finally all be on the same page. But that's not the way it works. There is a final right and wrong. There's a final say on right and wrong. And unfortunately, it's not me.
See, I would be more than willing to defer to somebody or something else as being the moral standard if that someone or something would present evidence that they even exist.
That's not what we're talking about.
Deity has not. I know, but this deity has not done so. So the idea that the rest of the world should then defer to the moral system that is being purported by this invisible, untouchable, unknowable being, their believers, is, I think, morally bankrupt to do.
But Godless, I'm not sure if I even agree with that, because it seems as if in the Old Testament, God carried himself in a way to where he made himself very clear, to where even the king that Daniel served referred to him as Daniel's God, not saying he was a fallacious God, but basically saying, yeah, that's Daniel's God. I think God was pretty apparent, but people still rejected him. I mean, even God's own people, they're following God. There's manna falling from the ground. There's a cloud by day, fire by night, and still they're rebellious. So I don't know if God revealing himself perfectly clear. You just got through saying that if God did appear clearly, you tell him to go screw himself. So why?
Hold on a second. I didn't say that. I said that that's what the anti-theist position would be.
Okay, gotcha.
Right, which is slightly different. Agreed. And there are times where I certainly start to sway that way, because when I hear somebody going through, well, yeah, this is a pretty, all the evidence that in everything I believe is this is an unworshipable deity, and anybody who would worship this deity is as morally bankrupt as this deity itself. Yeah, well, I'm not going to buy into that. I don't think I could.
All right, so let me put you in Joey question land. So you, God appears, and there's no doubt in your mind. You're like, oh my gosh, this is God. Oh wow, this is God. I can't deny it. So whatever God had to do to prove to you that he was God, he did. What does he have to tell you or answer to you in your mind to make you believe that he's worth worshiping?
The God knows that.
What?
The God would know what that is. I don't know what that is. But it's the same thing. If this God is all-knowing and all-powerful, then they know better than I do.
Now, why don't you understand what Mark is saying? So basically, you are acknowledging that this is God. Why is that not in itself worthy of worship? I mean, who else are you going to worship? If you know,
I'm not going to worship anything. I certainly wouldn't worship anything that isn't presenting itself. I mean, you take the Doubting Thomas story, and I hate digging into the Bible and all that stuff because it's a waste, right? But
did you just say right?
But the Doubting Thomas story, I can relate to Doubting Thomas. Doubting Thomas is like, you haven't shown me anything, bud. And then, oh, well, now there's this big revelation. Oh, okay, well, now I believe you. And the lesson that comes out of that to me is, well, all right, well, we all should be Doubting Thomases. And as soon as we're revealed to, well, now we got a whole new set of questions and we can start to tackle them.
Those are questions
Joey, okay.
No, go ahead, Jared. Go ahead.
I was going to say, my big thing here is how can Godless talk about morality and morals if there is no God?
That's my point.
Very
from the
easily.
Very beginning.
No. This is very easy. Morality comes from secular morality, which is the morality I would argue that all of us are living under, at least in the United States and most of Western Europe. Right? It's based on empathy, solely, totally, 100% based on empathy.
But who cares? Lions and tigers have no empathy. They eat each other.
I'm not talking about lions and tigers. I'm talking about human beings.
What makes us different? If we're purely the product of evolution, there is no God, then who cares what we do? Isn't nihilism the logical conclusion to that?
I don't know. You got a boatload of terms there, and none of it means anything. If I were to pull out a dictionary next to nihilism, there would be 7 different definitions, and I would answer that, and you would pick which one is most convenient to you. It's BS. You should get away from that stuff. So what I'm saying is that human beings thinking human beings, because not all of them are able to think. Some of them got a 67 IQ. I don't know how many on the call here do, but those who have a greater than 67 IQ, thinking humans, have the ability to have empathy. And when you look at somebody and you go, you know what? I don't want to live in a world where I or my family could become slaves to other people. And therefore, I'm not going to treat that person the same way, because I can think about what that would be like, and that would suck. And
So it's a purely pragmatic morality then.
It's secular morality. Yeah, absolutely.
Pragmatic.
Because
Okay,
we,
then
we,
what-
we
why-
all want a world that's great for us to live in. So the
why
best
was
way to
Hitler
explore,
immoral?
the best way to achieve that is by treating others in the same kind of way.
Unless
now,
you can
if you
master
go
them.
by the morality that comes out of your stinking Bible, slavery is still in effect.
Okay, does
How
God
could you
necessarily condone
possibly
that?
argue for that?
Well, no, I think the Bible shows man sinning and not sinning. So I'm not saying the Bible necessarily
The
advocates ghost
Bible
slavery.
advocates very, very clearly for slavery.
No, it
For
doesn't.
slavery. Yes,
No.
it does.
So listen, the Bible is talking from a time period where slavery was around. Why are you saying that it's basically advocating it?
Because God
Because
gives
Bibli-
instructions on how to do it.
Yeah, but the Bible, I mean, God also gives.
Are you telling me that God is not powerful enough to tell the people that it created that these are the laws? It can say you can't eat oysters on Friday, but sure, you guys can still keep on owning people. That's cool with me for a little while.
Okay,
is that
so
what you're trying to argue?
So basically, you want God then to rather just destroy all the slave owners and everybody that advocates slaves, because God also was okay with divorce. Or let me restate that. God also permitted divorce for a time period because he's working within fallen humans. So
No,
you
God is not working with fallen humans. God is working what God, an all-powerful being, supposedly wants to have happen. It's you're trying to argue that God has to defer to where we're at that time. Why the hell would he have to do that? It's God.
Okay,
he can
then
do anything it wants.
Exactly. Then he should just destroy us all, is what I
No,
would say then.
God doesn't need to do. He could do that. He could do something else.
Okay,
Whatever.
well then
But
he
the
needs to
idea-
turn us all
but
into
the whole-
robots.
But the
then
whole
turn us all into
idea-
robots.
But the whole idea that somehow this God is morally necessary.
No, but let me
or
ask you that then.
religious
So-
morally necessary is absolutely asinine.
So what is it? So he can either work amongst us and work through, even though we are messed up, or he can destroy us, or he can turn us all into robots. What do you think he should do?
Again, false choices.
Well, you tell me the choice then. What does he need to do?
I'm just saying, if you were
Just-
to believe in some sort of divine being that supposedly it has the moral, the correct moral compass, it would be making correct moral decisions. If you believe that slavery is correct, then hallelujah, you agree with God. I don't. I don't think that that's morally correct. I don't believe that slaughtering another people and then taking the surviving wives and daughters and raping and marrying them off to the soldiers is morally correct. Your God does.
But according to your morality, you said it's pragmatism. So if I feel like the way to
Wait,
get
no,
ahead,
you called it pragmatism.
but you agreed. You agreed. You said that.
I
you agree
said
with
that
me.
it's all about, but I said that what it is it's secular morality, just like everything, including all of us, evolves. Secular morality is about trying to create a world that all of us can function in, can survive in. You can do anything you want as long as you don't hurt anybody else. That's okay. I think that's a good thing. Don't hurt yourself. Don't hurt somebody else. Why would that be morally?
So is that an
incorrect?
absolute?
No, it's absolute. There are no absolutes.
Okay. So there's no absolute morality, right?
Define absolute morality. I'd
A
love to hear
a
this.
morality that applies to all people at all times.
It's universal
Are you
morality.
trying
That's what
to-
we're talking about. I mean, it's obvious. That's where
Are you
you're
trying
aiming.
to argue. Are you trying to argue that Christianity has had an absolute morality? Are you trying to say your Bible has had an absolute morality?
I believe that God has established absolute right and wrong. Yes.
Then why is the Old Testament so different from the New?
Well, I think Joey made the point that God is working through fallen people.
And I'm making the point that that's ridiculous.
I would submit that it's only different in theme. It's still fulfilled within the New Testament. All the Old Testament is doing is providing a greater picture. I don't.
Right, so,
I think it's an easy thing to dismiss, and then to name the slavery as the one issue that's going to be the sticking point. When in truth there's still some debate. It's a fact. There is debate. Is it slavery or bondservants? What is the difference?
There is no debate that slavery is morally bankrupt.
No, the debate. That's not what I said. The debate is to whether or not it was the slavery that we know as slavery, like American people enslaving black people here in this country, or is it bondservants? There's a big difference, and there's a lot has to do with the interpretation.
No, there's not a big difference.
There is a bondservant and a manservant, a person who is employed by a ruler. That was the time.
Mark, would you be willing to live under a system in which you may be enslaved for years and years, whether you owe money to somebody else or not?
Thankfully, I don't have to.
Think that. I know.
I wasn't born into
Isn't
that.
that fortunate? Thank you, secular morality. You don't have to.
I wouldn't attribute that to secular morality. I would attribute it to
Godless.
There's nothing in the Bible
I don't
that
see
says
the morality
that
coming from
slavery
anyone other than
is
God.
bad.
Godless. It's biblical teachings that led to the abolition of slavery. Clearly.
Baloney.
How was it not? Do you wait? Hold on. Do you realize that when Paul mentions slavery, do you realize how ahead of the time his teachings were? When people read it, they said, "What? Are you serious? There's supposed to be mutual respect between a master and a slave. Are you kidding me? That's
not the history.
unprecedented.
That's not the history. If you look at true history, there were thousands of years before then where there were cultures all over the world that did not practice slavery.
So,
Okay.
Yeah, what I don't understand what that means.
So what that means is that those cultures.
Yeah, but Paul was in a Roman culture.
Yeah, but so are you saying that God was only talking to the Romans?
No, I'm saying that we are operating in what I would call a secular culture right now as well. Am I supposed to stand up and denounce everyone as evildoers that don't understand my morality, or should I try to operate and function in a way of showing people love and at the same time? I mean, like here's a perfect example. There are some ways of carrying out our sexuality, and not even necessarily homosexuality. We're not getting into that, but there are some ways of carrying out sexuality that I don't necessarily agree with. For example, having sex outside of marriage. That's one that I don't agree with. I have no interest in saying you're not allowed to do that, though. That means nothing to me. So what does that mean? That means I'm a Christian that believes that it's wrong, but I have no desire to go out and tell someone that they cannot do that because they don't have an understanding and they haven't accepted God. They're not operating from that standpoint. So as far as I'm concerned, my number one objective is for them to understand truth. So why is it that I need to have them understand where I'm coming from? So I think what I'm saying then is that God is seeing eternity past all the way to eternity future. He sees the mess that he's working within, so he is working his will through it. And if his will is perfect Jesus coming and rescuing us all, then okay.
It's hilarious listening to how you'll ask these questions on the podcast. Yeah, ask all sorts of questions, whether it's dealing with refugees or dealing with gun control, all these different issues, and I'll listen to everybody trying to work this a position based on the information coming from the Bible. And we pray about it and we do all this stuff, and you cannot come up with answers. You have it in the name of the show. Instead of saying, you know what? This is what I think, and this is why, and be able to base it on real things, real evidence, real experience, things that we all can share as a community, and be able to come out with answers out of that. And I think that is superior. And I think that's how most of the time we function, and thank goodness we do. Now, as far as the idea of slavery, the only reason that it's brought up is because it's the thing that's most clearly advocated for in the Bible. And it's so
you gotta define
obviously
that.
morally bankrupt.
I don't believe that slavery is advocated for in the Bible. There are times when God commands his people to take people slaves, but I don't see this as some sort of general, this is the way you're supposed to do things, because it clearly changes.
And
it clearly changes. But even then, it still doesn't change where I came from the very beginning, which is to say that if this is the way God determined that things were going to be, it's simply the way they were going to be. And there's nothing that you can say. There's no way to get around it. If he determined this as a way of illustrating his will, then that's just the way that he determined it.
If a God wants me to fight for that, the least that God could do is provide some sort of evidence that it exists. If the God cannot do at least that with all of its power, there is no way in the world that I could possibly put any energy into a fight for that kind of bankrupt morality.
That would be bankrupt morality dependent on your definition of the term morality, which is, again, going to change over and over and over again.
Subjective and relative.
I would
Absolutely.
certainly hope that we could at least agree that slavery, in all of its forms, including how it's depicted in the Bible, is not morally good.
Yeah, but I would say the same thing. I agree with you, and I would say the same thing about
How could you
divorce.
disagree with your God? How could you possibly do that?
But
I don't,
that's the
just
thing,
so you
though.
know.
Listen. God does not agree with divorce, but he permitted it because he's just like, well, you know what? They're going to divorce, so we might as well have a way of doing it. They're so lost. God does not agree with polygamy. What did he do? He permitted it because, and what I mean by permitted is he didn't destroy people for taking part in it. He still worked through people. You know, God doesn't agree. God doesn't agree with a lot of the stuff that I do, but he's still working.
Let me
through
step
me.
here.
Hold on, Mark. Let me stop real quick, Joey. What I think is really funny is how you've said, well, God said this and God said that, and He allows this and He allows that. When there are giant sects of the Christian community who read the same book you do, and come up with completely and utterly different opinions as to what God does want to permit and likes and doesn't like on those very same issues.
I don't know what to say.
I don't know about
that.
the issues that I'm saying, though.
I can
There
say
are giant sects of the Christian community that either do encourage polygamy or don't encourage polygamy.
Okay,
And
yeah,
there
but
are giant sects that
Wait,
love
are you
divorce.
saying
and
Mormonism
others that
is
don't.
Christianity?
we're getting
I'm
off
saying
on a
it's a sect
tangent
of
here.
it.
We were still.
Yeah, but I could say that there's a lot of atheists that believe the same way Hitler, and you should wear swastikas and kill people, but that doesn't
The
necessarily
Catholic
loop
Church
you into
agreed
them.
with Hitler. There was a ton of people who agreed with Hitler.
Yeah, but
there was
like
a
I
huge
said,
part of
you
the
can't-
Christian community in the United States that agreed with Hitler.
Okay.
That's why it took so long for us to get over there.
And I'm going to agree with you that there's a lot of jacked up followers of Jesus, including myself. And I would also say, sure, there's a lot of people that read the same Bible that go different directions as far as what this means and that means. But if I have someone that says Jesus is Lord and everything else must submit to him, that's a Christian, and we can disagree on a lot of things. But that right there is the common ground. So sure, there's a lot of stuff that I just can't understand. So my interpretation is going to be different from Mark's, going to be different from Jared's. But the Jesus' Lordship is what, ties us all together.
Mark, what were you going to say earlier?
I was just going back. Like we were on a subject of slavery, and a thing that is clearly, like, everyone in this conversation views slavery, especially in the context of this country and the way we experienced it as Americans in our history. We see it as evil and as something that's nothing like the God that we know and believe in. And yet in the Old Testament, here he is commanding the Israelites to put people into slavery. What I would simply say is, if this God has determined that this is going to happen, I'm not trying to make excuses for him. I'm not trying to apologize for him. I would also bring up, like I said before, Job, there are things that he does that I don't understand, that we as individuals do not understand. And I don't know that I even agree with. But that's okay with me, because it still keeps the main questions that I have are still being answered. And just like with science or with anything else, I'm waiting for the answers on the rest. If it comes to be that God is not there for me on an individual basis, I can honestly say that I will be ready for that. I can honestly say that I am willing to be wrong. I just want it to be known. I'm not trying to apologize for him. If God is who I believe God claims him to be, then whatever he determines is righteousness. Whether you agree with it, or I agree with it, or no one agrees with it, is irrelevant. If he is that God, his will is all there is.
So I think what you've set up is this idea that your God is morally correct because your God has determined what is morally correct.
Well, it's not what I've set up. It's what I'm saying.
But
it's definitely what
yeah,
I'm saying.
and that's that.
It's not what I set up, obviously.
That to me is absolutely, it's logically flawed, and I am absolutely frightened of any community that would possibly subscribe to that. And it is so unfortunate. There have been 2,000 years of communities who have.
Yeah. Well, I would ask, what do you see of the actions of my life? I mean, obviously you don't know me. You wouldn't know the way my life is. I mean, are you balanced? You're basing that judgment on me off of me stating that simple thing. And yet the actions of my life, I think, show a completely different picture. So I'm not sure. At some point, this has to be applied, and we have to live life. We could sit here and go back and forth about these types of things, and whether or not we agree with them or not, but we still have to make a determination. What are we going to do? How are we going to live our lives? And I feel I am doing everything that I can to live a peaceful, loving life. And all of that is because of what I know about God. So somewhere there's a disconnect.
But you've said completely the opposite earlier. You've said
according to you.
No, you said earlier there are huge parts of this Bible that are basically saying this is not a very nice God. This is
according to you. Yeah, according to you.
No, that's what you had said.
According to the human understanding, what we may, to these humans, what we may decide is right or wrong, that's not jiving with God. But I'm willing to be wrong there.
Frightening. I find it frightening that you would punish other people. You would allow the suffering, needless suffering.
But that's not the action of my life.
I'm just saying, you would allow the needless suffering of other people because you choose to worship this morally bankrupt.
How is Mark doing that?
If God himself told me to go enslave someone, I would do it. Yes, you're right.
Yes. And you know what? There are tons of people on this earth who believe that God is speaking to them and saying those very kinds of things.
But he's not. That's the thing. He's not.
He's
doing
not
that
talking
anymore.
to anybody, and I don't give you a good reason why. It's a real simple one. Because God isn't there.
Okay.
Well, let me ask you this, Godless. As far as you said, a good way of looking at morality is just empathy for other people. What about the other super nice guy that seems awesome and smart and rational, but he says, hey, I mean, I really do think morality, it starts primarily with taking care of ourselves. So we were only given ourselves, and so we have to prioritize ourselves. So whatever it takes for us to survive, we have to do that. Would you say, well, that's immoral?
Yes, I would.
You're being inconsistent then.
No, I'm not being inconsistent because that person is not expressing empathy.
According to you.
Can you show me how he might be?
No, I'm just saying, you're saying that morality has to conform.
How does somebody who is being completely and utterly self-centered possibly expressing empathy under any other person's perspective?
Okay, let me retract a little bit. So what I'm trying to say is, according to you, the universal standard of morality is empathy, according to you. But according to him, it's not. So you're putting an absolute, defining an absolute, and you're basically applying it to somebody else.
I'm not.
But in a world with no God, there is no absolute morality.
I'm expressing an opinion. And
Great. Okay.
And the reason
now you're being consistent.
that I'm doing that is because there is no other way to do it. There is no other imposed morality from something else. We have to, as a community, work together in order to find out what it is that is best for all of us. That's how a community works.
I hate saying this, but wouldn't you say Hitler was operating off of his opinion too?
Yeah, but that could have been a religious opinion. It could have been any opinion.
Yeah, but I'm just saying though that's.
Hitler was a Christian.
No, he wasn't.
Hitler was a Christian.
He was a eugenist.
He was a cultic pagan. There's no way he was a Christian.
Hitler was a Christian.
History will back that up.
That's
with a ton of support from the Catholic Church.
Yeah, but that's like
political though. That's totally political.
Yeah, that's like someone saying, "Hey, I'm an atheist and I believe that we need to kill all the Christians," and then for me to say, "Well, that guy claimed to be an atheist, so explain yourself, Godless."
If you were to look inside history, you've got tons and tons of evil people who believe all sorts of different things, religious, non-religious, etc. To me, it's irrelevant. It really comes down to, was it the morally correct thing to do? Absolutely, positively not by any standard.
So that's an absolute morality. That's an absolute moral standard that you're
It's
imposing.
an opinion. And you know what? And we've got a community that can form an opinion. That's how that works. Because it's the only thing that is available.
And it's all relative then. Every opinion is relative and equally valid.
No, every opinion is determined by a community. We as humans are trying to all find a way to work the best together. And the
Third Reich Germany, his opinion was validated.
No, it was good for him. For a short amount of time, it was no good
Germany.
For Jews, for gays, for the gypsy community, etc. For homosexuals, and for anybody who had any birth deformities. There's a ton of people that wasn't good for, and those people are part of that community.
I just don't think you can escape the fact that morality in your worldview is completely relative.
I don't think you can escape the reality that the morality that's imposed by Christianity in that Bible is morally bankrupt.
If there is a God, then there are absolute morality.
And this is the problem.
Right and wrong.
And let me add to that. The problem is that book doesn't get updated. It should have been a hell of a long time ago. It doesn't get updated. It still has the awful ideas that it had 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. At least with secular morality, it evolves and gets better over time. At least we've got that.
Well, what would you say if God, when it comes to what would you say is your number one beef with Old Testament?
Jeez, I guess my number one beef is
we don't have enough time for that on this show.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Can of worms. Oh my goodness. It's because there's no truth in it.
No, but as far as the actions of God.
Well, he's slaughtering people left, right, and center. And he's doing it without reason or just to support one
without
group
reason
of
that
people.
you will acknowledge. He has his
own. What if
just allow me this. If God is who he claims to be, just as for the sake of argument, and this is what he has decided to do, what other permission is required?
I guess I don't understand the question.
Well, we're
talking about whether it's the morally correct thing to do or not.
Right. So you're trying to weigh in on God's morality. I mean, that's what that question is.
In the Old Testament, I think it should be for most any thinking person. It should be relatively easy to do and relatively easy to come down with.
You are
not right.
But we're not. We're getting past what my question was. If he is who he claims to be in this Bible, why is that even necessary? Isn't it possible?
That God
isn't it possible that he has his own designs that are beyond what you could comprehend? Is that possible? If he is that person he claims to be.
All this is based on this idea that for some reason I should take the idea that this God is real seriously when there's no good reason to do so.
But I'm asking you a simple question. If he is who he claims to be, isn't that enough?
No, not if he's also asking for my worship. Not if he's also asking for me to defer to him.
Because if he's who he claims to be, he commands you to worship him. It's not even asking. It's just not an option. Every knee will bow.
And thank goodness, as somebody who I think is a relatively good person, I have the good judgment, given by a God or not, to be able to say, yep, that's not good. It's not good.
You're not answering my question, but I understand where you're coming from. I understand what you're saying. I fully understand what you're saying.
And to add to it, I think I question anybody who would possibly react to it with, yeah, well, he said it's good, so that's good enough for me.
I think it's thought through a little bit more than that, but I can understand where you're.
Is it really? Yeah. I'm not sure it is.
Well, that's fine. You don't have to be sure. Thankfully, I don't have to answer to you. But I think I've made a simple question, man. I asked you a question and you don't want to answer it. I don't understand why. It's really not that big of a deal.
I'm not quite sure how I'm supposed to answer it because
if God is who God says he is,
and I'm saying,
and he has his own purposes, what explanation is needed?
There is none. And it's at the same time, I can reject it for being morally wrong.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean there's no God.
We can jump to that eventually. We know that's where we're going to get to.
But Jared, how could you possibly? I just got done saying this is baloney because it's not real. And then when I do answer the question, Mark, you heard it. Then you go, but how does that say that it's not real? Ah, God, it's a freaking catch-22. No wonder all the time you guys are driving yourselves crazy on this podcast. Every time you answer a question, it opens a new can of worms that makes things even more uncomfortable than the first time.
Now, don't you think though we would say, or I would say the same thing about your standard of morality. There's no way, and I think that's where I would have to say. You definitely make valid points. You definitely have there's logic to what you're saying. Mm-hmm. I also think there's some illogic to what you're saying, especially when it comes to morality and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, you have faith that the God that Mark is talking about that says, hey, I am God, worship me or not, I'm telling you, you need to. You don't believe that God exists. We do. So wouldn't you say that there's faith both ways?
No, absolutely not. There's no faith here because I'm constantly questioning and constantly attacking. And as far as secular morality is concerned, if you could for a moment turn off the idea that there is a God, and I were to ask you, okay, on the slavery question, no God involved, what is the morally correct thing to do there? And then you were to give an answer, and I would say, okay, well then why do you believe that? Now we've got a discussion. Now we've got progress. Now we've got the formation of a morality that an entire community can subscribe to. Until that point, when you defer to this invisible being in the sky, you shut down the conversation. There is no progress. And then to make it worse, we have a morally bankrupt God being deferred to that's absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong.
All right. Does anybody have any closing words?
I think that Godless and I have equal amounts of faith.
Equal amounts of faith. Mark,
Yes.
do you have anything you want to close with?
I think faith is applied action. That's all there is to it. If you're not living it out, then there's no point.
Godless?
Oh my goodness. I love the way that Jared accuses me of things and that are absolutely untrue. and yet at the same time, this is a fallacy, but damn it, you believe in ancient aliens. I don't know how in the world I could possibly
I don't. Ancient aliens? I don't.
How the pyramids get built, dude.
No, I didn't say ancient aliens. No.
Well,
No,
there's
no,
no
no.
other explanation, man. I mean, we should at
No,
least
no,
take
it's
it
not-
seriously.
What the
There's
hell
no
are you
evidence for it.
talking about?
Not what I said.
That's a
Not what I said.
No,
Silly.
Jared and I
Not what I
talked
said.
about demonic.
Yes.
Demonic,
Se-
totally
yeah,
different.
seraphims and all these other like. Oh my goodness, God! You guys need really not to take your head out of it. And I'm just saying. I guess my finishing thought would be: take a moment to think all about all these things. And when you ask a question and it just makes the answer makes you so uncomfortable, then just get rid of the original premise just as an exercise and ask the question again and then see what happens. And I promise you it feels so much better.
All right. Well, I would say it's only fitting since you're the only atheist on this call, you get the last word. Except for the fact that I will say no God, that's K-N-O-W, and you will no peace, that's K-N-O-W. But if there is no God, that's N-O, then you will have no peace, that's N-O, and we'll wrap.
Oh my
That was a
god.
bumper sticker on Mark
Yeah.
Solomon's card, I think, right?
So this is Joey Svensson, and you've been listening to The Pastor with No Answers. We want to thank you for listening and joining us in the conversation. If you want to converse a little bit with us, go to facebook.com/BC Pastor. And we also have a Twitter handle at PWNA Pod. And don't forget, dancoke.net. Coke is spelled K-O-C-H. That's dancoke.net. That's where this music comes from. And we love it. And we want you to go to that website if you're interested in Dan making your music. Thanks again. And next week, you're going to be in for a huge surprise of what we're going to talk about. Not really, but it's going to be pretty awesome. We'll see you next week.
Curse these hands, they only toil in vain. They've caused a lot of pain around the ones I love the most. Lord, curse these hands until they only work for you. In everything I do, your kingdom come. Lord, curse these lips until they only speak of peace. Lord, all of you and none of me. Lord, keep my feet from where my heart often ventures. The world outside is crashing down around my feet. Curse these eyes until they seek your face, no longer drifting